والسلام على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم علمني ما ينفعني وانفعني بما علمتني. رب زدني علما. Inshallah ta'ala, today's topic is about challenges facing the Islamic da'wah or the Muslim da'wah in the United States. And of course, I'm not the first one to talk about this. This is not a brand new subject. Actually, there have been many discussions. If you just Google them, you'll see many people who have spoken about this. And there are even papers that I have written to discuss the challenges that are facing the Muslim community in the United States. So before I start, just some things that to keep in mind. One, of course, my talk is really based on my perception of reality, meaning this is as far as I can tell from my humble position, from my humble view. So I am not exposed to everything that happens in the United States, to every effort, to everything, but I am exposed to whatever I'm exposed to through my presence in the masajid and my interaction with the Muslim community, some readings here and there. So definitely it's not going to be complete, and it is not going to be, final. These are just my humble views. Another point is that we are talking about the challenges. So we are not talking about the achievements Muslims have made, the good things, the positives that Muslims have made. So that my speech, if it looks like, or my presentation, if it is a bit on the critical or on the negative side, or not on the, negative in perspective, it's because the topic is the challenges. It's not the topic is not the achievements. It's not what we have done, where we succeeded, how far we've come. The topic is about, what is facing us now. So with that being said, I would say that challenges exist on all levels of the da'wah. And to start with, there are certain things that are about the American society, in the American context, where really, whether we like it or not, they shape and they create big challenges towards the Islamic da'wah. The first one is, of course, the changes that happen in the world, politically and security-wise. Anything that happens in the world related to the Muslim Ummah, it impacts the Muslims in the United States. Just one act of violence, one issue that happens in Syria or in Afghanistan or in Palestine or here or there, automatically the repercussions of that action comes and actually impacts the Muslims in the United States. And here I'm talking about the Muslims in the United States only. I'm not talking about Europe or the West in general, just the United States. So whether we like it or not, anything that happens in those aspects, automatically they pose challenges to the Muslims, because automatically work that is being done stops because of either fear, intimidation, inappropriate climate for da'wah to continue in one way or another. So these definitely are challenges, and they are, in a way, they are not something under our control. This is something that's happening as a, as a hallmark, if you wish, or as something that's continuous in our lifetime. The other thing is that the reality of the society that we live in, that it is, historically speaking, they have inherited ideas that Islam is bad, Islam is an enemy. In other words, they view Islam from a historical perspective as something that is negative and something that's evil. This is way before the idea of terrorism or anything like that. This is way before that. The culture, the Christian culture that they grew up in the United States, in Europe in general, and the United States specifically, it is actually anti-Islam and Muslims. And you find this present amongst politicians. Just all we have to do is just remember back to the days of Trump. And it's not that Trump himself was just bad and he hated Islam or Muslims, but actually he presented the Americans with something they could relate to. Islam hates us. He said Islam hates us. And actually the problem with the message of Trump, it's not that it is one individual, but actually brought up the hostility that exists in the society at large. where you have a big number of people, ended up voting for him with that kind of rhetoric against Islam, Muslims, immigrants, etc., because they're all lumped up in one thing. So amongst the politicians and the media, you take any event that takes place, and look at the way that they cover Muslim-related or Islamic-related news versus non-Muslim related news. So you have people who keep count, for example, every time they mention the word Islam, how many times they mention the word terror with it? Every time they mention an act of violence committed by a Muslim, how many times do they mention terrorism with it? And they compare it with other stories. And how many times, let's say, the religion of the perpetrator or the person who performed the act is actually mentioned as something that is prominent in the story in comparison to with Islam. And you can Google this. You have websites like Counterpunch and things like that, where they actually keep track of how many the number of times that NPR mentioned Islam and terrorism simultaneously. How many times they mention the act of violence committed by a Muslim in relationship to something similar committed by somebody, a non-Muslim. And they do the comparisons and tells you that's how it is actually geared towards that. So that's a challenge, because that impacts the society that you're working in, excuse me, and the people that you are working with. So if you are supposed to carry the da'wah to non-Muslims, or even the Muslims around you who are supposed to carry da'wah, they get influenced by this and they get impacted by the situation we are living in. Another reality that we are dealing with that poses a major challenge is the reality of the American society. Before they used to talk in the 80s about whether the United States is a melting pot or a mosaic, meaning where is everybody supposed to actually melt to become an American, a secular person thinking in the mindset of an American, etc. Your religion can be whatever, it doesn't matter. But you're supposed to be managed, socialized in such a way that at the end of the result, at the end of the day, you become an American in a certain frame of mind, versus no, you maintain what identifies you. You maintain your religion, your language, your culture, your traditions, and you add more color to the mosaic, to the big picture of the United States. So that was rhetoric. Reality is, and you go through every minority group, and you'll see that they went through the same process, whether African Americans, who were brought as slaves, or you're talking about the Italians, you're talking about the Irish, you're talking about everybody had to smelt in the society to come out something different. And of course, this is generational. So it's not in the first generation of immigrants. You go for the third, fourth generation, and you'll see actually nothing left from what the parents brought. If at all, they'll tell you on such and such day we have a gathering, we have this kind of food or that kind of food, or maybe 3/4 down, up in the name, they will mention a Chinese name or an Irish thing, but at the end of the day, everybody melts in it. And we Muslims are not unique in this situation, because the one major challenge for the da'wah in America actually is the melting or the melting of the Muslims in the American pot, where our children and their children have lost a very major portion of their Islamic identity, that they don't feel the need to even call for Islam. And this is something I'll touch about, inshallah ta'ala. I'll touch over a little bit later on. But if you notice, most of the people who are active in da'wah or active in whatever the da'wah is, you will find them most of the time, they are not second, third, fourth generation Muslims. You find them most of the time first generation. The people who run the masajid and they take care of the masajid and the salah for the musallin, most of them are not second, third, fourth generation Muslims. Most of them are actually immigrants, first generation Muslims. Why? That is a question that was a challenge, because the problem is, you want the continuity with the da'wah and the continuity of the Islamic work. You cannot have it stop at the people, the first wave of Muslims, the immigrants, and then it dies out after that. So this is something that we will revisit inshallah ta'ala in a few minutes. But you can see that the Islamic identity in general, of course, إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ, except for few, in general, the Islamic identity becomes weaker and weaker. It's more in the background than actually it exists with the first generation, either immigrants or the people who became Muslims and embraced Islam. So the identity in those seems to be much more in general. I'm not talking about, you'll have many people who immigrants, first generation who left Islam altogether from into practical terms. And you have many people who are, from first or second or third generation who are, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alamin, better Muslims than me, and many of the other Muslims. So it is, you have the exception to the rule if you wish, but it is the norm we're talking about generally speaking. So the first thing that we want to talk about, what do we mean by da'wah? Because if you talk to, people who run the masajid, that's a form of da'wah. The people who go and stand up in the street and give leaflets about Islam, it is da'wah. Those who engage, Christians in the dialogue in their churches and they talk to them about Islam and Christianity, they call that da'wah. Those who actually in the political process and they engage politically and they vote and they get involved with this senator and that congressman and this president and this and that, they call that a form of da'wah. People who run orphanages or humanitarian aid, like people who take care of the orphans and the widows, and and they open these centers, they call that as well da'wah. So the idea of da'wah is vast in what constitutes this Islamic da'wah. So when we talk about challenges that face it, you are talking about all kinds of work that is going on. And each person, each group of activists in that field will call that Islamic da'wah. Okay? So I'm not here now to judge this is or this is not, this is more important than the other one. That's not my place. But I would say that, and hopefully I will come back to it later on, that it is, we need Islamic guidance from the ulama and from the people who have knowledge in the needs of Muslims and knowledge in Sharia to actually provide some type of a suggestion, some type of direction for Muslims to proceed. Because not everything is the same. Not all actions are equal. Not all, forms of da'wah, if you want to call them forms of da'wah, are the same. And so we need that kind of interference or that kind of presentation by people with background knowledge in Islam and in the American society and the challenges that are facing the Muslims. But all of them, regardless which area they are doing the da'wah in, we need to pause a little bit and just take a view of some of the challenges that take place. So I'm not going to present what should be, what should not be. Again, this is not the focus of this discussion. The other thing is that, but the first thing, regardless what you are doing, we have to be clear on what we are working towards. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Yusuf, قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ أَنَا وَمَنِ اتَّبَعَنِي وَسُبْحَانَ اللَّهِ وَمَا أَنَا الْمُشْرِكِينَ. That this is my way. Say, this is my way. I call to Allah, to Tawheed, to worshipping Him, على بصيرة, with clear, decisive proofs, with clarity, understanding what I'm doing. أنا ومن اتبعني, me and whoever follows me, whoever follows the path of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has to do their work based on basira. So based on Islamic rules, based on Islamic etiquettes, based on understanding of what are you trying to achieve or accomplish here and there. So the first one, of course, when you don't have a clear goal that you're working towards, that will make it difficult to even decide, are we succeeding or are we not succeeding? Are we making progress or are we not? Because what are you measuring against if the goal itself is not clear? So here, this is the first challenge. The first challenge is the lacking of a clear direction for the Muslims as a community, guided by Islamic knowledge and guided by Islamic presentation by the ulama and the people who have that ability to provide, direction to the Muslims. Most ulama, most individuals, when you talk to them, they'll tell you everything is good. Alhamdulillah, this person is doing this, that person is doing that, this person is doing this. But if I may say, no, things should be a bit more organized. I'm not saying that everybody will be doing the same, but I'm saying that there should be an Islamic discussion amongst the ulama and amongst the people of fatwa in this country to come up with some general direction for Muslims to prioritize their goals, to focus on certain things versus others, etc. Now, leaving the goal aside, I would just want to move over to the people who are carrying the da'wah, because there are challenges there as well. Most of the people who carry da'wah and they are active, they are volunteers. They are not full-time people. So if I'm volunteering, then after 10 hours of work and 2 hours of commute, and I'm already burnt out 12 hours a day, and I have a wife and kids, and I have my, whatever I need to take care of. Now that remaining is what you're getting from me. So automatically you are challenged. You don't have the ability to have people who can focus, who can specialize in what they are doing, to focus on what they're doing, giving you the 110% that you're looking for, because at the end of the day they're volunteers. And we are at the same time, there is an idea about volunteerism somehow amongst the Muslims, at least some Muslims, that simply because you're a volunteer, it's okay to come late. It's okay not to show up. It's okay to, not to be prepared. It's okay not to, why? Because I'm volunteering. This is what I can do. Actually, you can do more, and it is serious. If you say, I'm going to show up at 9, you show up at 9. If you are going to teach Islam, be prepared to teach Islam. If you are going to do, if you are saying, I'm going to carry da'wah to non-Muslims, you need to educate yourself in the religions of the people or the non-Muslims as well as in Islam. Because that's the idea, that's the whole idea of volunteerism. But when you are a volunteer, at best, when you try your best, you're still not getting 100%, because that person, we're all humans. So the first challenge is that most of the time, the people who are activists are volunteers. And therefore, to think that they are going to specialize and they stand out in, let's say, comparative religion, in contemporary Western thought, they're going to become specialized in philosophy, or in economics, where they can actually take on professors in colleges and they have debates or they have discussions about how Islam views the economy as an example, or economics, the theory of economics versus the Western theory of capitalism, etc. You're not going to get those, because simply that requires people who are doing this day in and day out, and you are not getting that. So that's the first challenge that you're facing. And most of them are not trained. Most of them, if they are trained, let's say da'wah, take an example of communicating with, let's say, Christians, they will maybe watch few Ahmad Didat tapes, they'll watch Zakir Naik, tapes, and read a couple of pamphlets, is the Bible the Word of God, and here I am, I'm ready to go. And actually, yes, you may be with an average person, maybe with less than average person, but things can become complicated where you need to become aware of really what you're doing. So that proper training does not exist. I don't know of a single place that actually provides proper training for those who are volunteers day in and day out, weekend in and weekend out, to build them to become able to address the topic they're in. So if they are doing politics, if they are involved in the political system, they need to understand the political system. Most volunteers who are active, they don't understand the political system. They think simply just go vote and go home. And the call, if you notice it amongst Muslims, you have to vote, you have to vote, you have to vote. To whom? Just vote. But the power of the vote is not in the power, or is the number, it's in the block. How many people from one area vote for, that's how they, depending whether it is national election, whether it is regional, or state level, or it has rules. There are things that you need to be aware of. Now, equally important, not only that you need to understand the system you're working in, you need to understand the Islamic rules that you have to function under in this system. Not everything goes. Just because a certain minority group can do X or Y in their interaction with politicians does not mean that we can do it as well. Because we have moral standards, we have criteria of right and wrong, haram and halal, that guide us regardless what we do. So because of the lack of training, you will find haphazard work that takes place by the people who are involved in such trainings. Okay? People who debate, you'll find them often, and I see them on social media. You know, you debating also, yes, there's some natural skills that you have, intelligence, knowledge of the subject you're doing it, but there are also skills that you need to learn. And you find a person not skilled, not trained in debating and making a mess representing Islam, you know. So or sometimes you will find them very knowledgeable in the subject. Let's say they're debating with a non-Muslim, but when it comes to a question about Islam, a simple question about Islam, they would not know because they did not train in that. So that creates a problem in the lack of knowledge in the subject matter, the lack of knowledge in the Islamic culture, or if you are talking about societal approach, or you're talking to the society at large, you're not familiar with the ideas that make up the contemporary thought of the Western societies. We don't understand the quote-unquote American mindset. How do they think? Because people, what makes them tick differ from place to place. Not everybody is the same, you know. So in other words, this is the challenge of building the cadre, building the people who are able to carry da'wah properly in the contemporary times. One challenge that we have, by the way, even with and where we Muslims, I would say probably most successful, is inviting people to Islam. So you have a high conversion rate, and we, alhamdulillah, we say, alhamdulillah, you know, the fastest growing religion in the United States is Islam, and this is fantastic. But it is the fastest growing religion, but at the same time, you will find that most of the effort stops at once a person says, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. There is no follow-up. You know how many people leave Islam afterwards? How many people disappear, go back in the weeds, and nobody knows about them? So we don't have mechanisms to deal with the new people or the people who embrace Islam. We don't have the follow-up, again, because you're relying on volunteers. I'm supposed to, after the wife and the kids and the family and the work, etc., I'm supposed to go follow up with this person, that person. And I'm not trained to do that. I don't know how to solve problems, you know, social problems, especially with their sisters. And their sisters need more help than the brothers, because you will find that if the sister starts covering up and the family tells her, okay, we'll kick you out of the house. Now she's in the street. Where are we keeping her? You know, there is no follow-up after that in terms of a structure to address those needs. Or let me say, it's whatever exists is inadequate. It's not sufficient to deal with the number of people who embrace Islam and the problems that they come in. So we don't have it. You know, even in the individual da'wah, you will find that, alhamdulillah, some person comes here, declare Islam, we celebrate, we say Allahu Akbar, and we hug the brother, and we send him off. Now who's following up? Oh, this brother, you know, and now did you reach? No, it has been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I haven't talked to him. It has, you know, because again, everybody is a volunteer and everybody is just trying their best. But in the process, you have a momentum that you just lost with the person who became a Muslim, you know, because there is, again, no follow-up. And this requires establishments to be in place. This requires institutions to be in place to address these issues. It cannot be based on volunteerism, especially with the sisters. Another challenge that's facing us on the level of the carriers of da'wah is the reduction in the number of people who are carrying the da'wah. I mentioned before that you'll find now the bulk of the Muslims now are second, third, fourth generation Muslims, even fifth generation Muslims who are here. And the people who tend to do the da'wah tend to be the ones who are actually either immigrants, first generation, or the people who became Muslims. My theory, my humble theory, is that second generation views Islam or the people with the American mindset who our children, we're talking about our children and grandchildren, they view Islam as a matter of choice. And meaning, I chose Islam, this is my personal choice, you chose something else, good for you, this is good for me. Meaning, they don't see the superiority of Islam over the other belief. They don't see the upper-handedness of Islam over the other belief. They don't see that this is actually, if I want to do a favor with this person, I would talk to them about Islam. If I really care about them, I need to guide them to Islam. They don't see that. They see that as, this is my personal things, and that's why you find them also inactive, because again, it's all about your personal growth. It's about the dhikr. It's about the feeling of closeness to Allah Ta'ala. It's about it's all about you as an individual, rather about the deen at large, that the Muslim community at large, the humanity at large, because they don't have that concern. They don't carry that burden, it seems, or many of them don't. They don't carry that burden, and they view it from the Western prism of religion. That religion is a personal choice. It is something personal, it's something innate, it's something related to you as an individual, not others, and that makes the number of people who are involved in da'wah dwindling and getting less, fewer and fewer, because the activism does not find it. You don't find it there. Even if they are active, most of the time you will find them active in the political system rather than in da'wah system, in da'wah matters. You'll find them, they're active in elections and voting and this, but most of the time not in the inviting others to Islam or something like that. Now the work again, in view of the society at large, meaning not inviting individuals to Islam like some people do. They drive up, they put a table, put some pamphlets, and they talk to this and that. And there's nothing wrong with any of this, by the way. But if you talk about the level on the, something that's on a societal level, you will find that one deficiency or one challenge is that we took the Islamic work on the level of society and shrunk it, compressed it to one thing and one thing only. It's called elections. As if there is nothing that helps the Muslims, and the Muslim causes, but elections and voting for this or that. So even sometimes, and again, this is because of the lack of knowledge and the lack of preparedness for what you're doing. Sometimes even if it's against things that are fundamental in Islam. So you have things that are, without going into details, you will find Muslim activists in the political system making alliances, making statements, making endorsements for things that absolutely contradicting the Islamic value system and the Islamic moral system. Yet they were involved because they view it only from the political maneuvering. This is what you gotta do to move ahead. This is what you need to do to move forward, things of this nature. So you will find, in other words, people are not thinking, the people who are involved in this, in the political system, many of them, they're not thinking from the prism of Islam, haram and halal, and how do I interact. They see it from what the system offers me, and that is what I will do to maximize my benefits from the system. But in the middle of it, we just lost Islam. We lost the Islamic identity, because as a Muslim, as an activist Muslim, what is there if I lose my Islamic reference point in the process? What have I achieved? If I start working towards things that Islam says no to. Islam is rejecting this, and I'm working to it under the guise, under the statement, this is to benefit the Muslims and Islam. Islam says no, but I insist no, yes. So the question is, where is the Islamic reference point in the process? So now in terms of thinking, here's the situation, here's the system, and this is my value system as a Muslim. How can I utilize this system, in a way that Islam approves, in a way that actually serves Islam and the Islamic message, and benefits Muslims? Rather, instead of doing that, I think about the system itself and what it can offer, and I jump in it. One major problem or one major obstacle that is facing Muslims, and now, by the way, just came recently or came out as a sign of it, the reference point. So you have Muslims have not decided yet, and again, this is where you need the ulama and the scholars to come and present their guidance. What is the reference point? Is it going to be Islam, the deen for us, or is it going to be the American Constitution? Now later, or some cross where they cross sometimes. What is it going to be? Because the people who refer to the Constitution, they established civil rights movements. And you have organizations that are active in the United States, without mentioning names, You have organizations that are active in the United States talking about civil rights for Muslims, getting the civil rights, getting and those are not Islamic organizations, those are civil rights organizations. They're not referencing in Islam, even if the majority of the people or of the leadership of these organizations are Muslims. But it is, and they serve the Muslim community, but they serve it from the point of view of civil rights rather than Islam. And you have the people who rely on the Islamic reference point, and those, often they don't interject or they don't get into the political system. Recently, I don't know if how many of you have gotten a chance to read it. There was an open letter written by some of the ulama of the Muslims in the United States, some activists. Actually, hundreds of people signed it, and it was about the LGBTQ issue and about teaching it, forcing that agenda on the Muslim children, the Muslim communities in that way. And in it, it was all good. One sentence that stood out and people had the debate over is that this is rights guaranteed by the Constitution. So you see that now that made some people uncomfortable, and that made people need further discussion. And I'm saying there needs to be further discussion amongst those who are qualified to have this discussion, and to come up with a formula for this for the Muslims to go on. I'm not here giving fatwas either way, but to say that the people who are able to do this, they need to provide guidance for Muslims regarding how to proceed with these things. But this is definitely a fundamental point when it comes to the Islamic work. Okay. Now, again, as related to the people who are involved in carrying the da'wah, you will have most of them are severely lacking in Islamic education. Severely lacking in Islamic education. So their exposure in reality to Islam most of the time is the khutbah of al-Jum'ah. And khutbah of al-Jum'ah, with all the respect to all khatibs, and most of the time you can go to sleep and get up and you did not really lose much. And it's the same khutbahs over and over and over that are given without addressing societal problems, people's problems from the prism or the point of view of Islam. But the lack of education in Islamic knowledge presents a problem, because you are sincere and you want to serve Islam, but at the same time you don't even know how. Just like I'm sincere and I want to pray, but I don't know how to pray. Still the salah is invalid. The prayer is invalid if I don't pray it correctly. Even if I mean well. Because meaning is something, that's the niyyah, that's your clear intention. And the action, because remember, you need two requirements for any action to be accepted. One, it has to have the right niyyah, the clear intention, the good intention. And the second is that the action has to be sanctioned by Islam. So you will find many of the people who are indulging in this, in these kinds of agendas, you will find them that they go against Islam for the service of Islam. So they claim. And that makes it a problem, because they are lacking severely in Islamic knowledge. And because of that, you find that they really don't feel much value to what I just said about we need the input of the ulama, and we need the input for the, why? I don't need them. I'm fine. I'll tell you what I need to do, because the system tells me I need to do this, I need to do that. There is no feeling that you need the input from people who are learned in the Islamic studies or in the Islamic sciences. Another challenge that is facing the Muslims in this is separation between the political work from the intellectual work or the da'wah work. Meaning what? You find most of the people who are involved in the society, as I said, they shrink the entire work to what? To political activism, to voting to the president candidate, or to the senator, to the congressman, or to the assemblyman or assemblywoman, but without the aspect that there is a da'wah attached with it. Meaning that there is Islam, not just, our interest is this. Our interest is to allow Muslims to, for example, to homeschool if they want to. So I need to vote to somebody who would get me that. It's more than that. So you find them on a society level, There is no, you do not find the presentation of Islam on a society level. So the da'wah here, I don't know if I can call that da'wah now. Because there is again no presentation of Islam, and that's why because they view themselves as a minority group. They don't see as people who are carrying the da'wah of mercy, da'wah, the Islam of rahmah to mankind. They see themselves as a minority. I'm just trying to get some rights, just like the other minority groups. I'm just trying to get the things, but that is fine. That is fine. But then we cannot call that Islamic da'wah. They cannot, because where is Islam involved in it? You need the component of Islam. So you find, for example, there is no discussion with the intellectuals of the society. There is no discussions with, let's say, professors from college, from colleges, that regarding various issues, because these are the people who make an influence in the thought process in the societies. Where is the knowledge? Where is the presentation of Islam? Hardly exists at all, except for some rituals that they would do maybe in Ramadan or something like that. But beyond that, there is no da'wah. I'll leave the people who carry the da'wah alone for a minute. How about another challenge is the material that we give the da'wah with. What material are we using? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَّسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ. That we did not send the messenger but with the tongue, the language of his people, so that he may explain to them. The purpose of, you cannot explain to them if you don't understand how they think, you do not understand how they speak, what they mean by their language, what they mean, to understand the challenges that are facing you, because you want to establish the hujjah. You want to establish the proof that Islam reached you. That's the point of the da'wah. And you cannot do that unless you are actually satisfying their questions and addressing their concerns. You find that most of the da'wah that at least I have seen, and I have not seen everything, of course, but whatever I have seen, you will find many of the da'wah material is still stuck in last century. You will find da'wah still talking about the Rasul's marriage to Aisha, and they're talking a very defensive in approach. How many people even worry about Aisha or worry about this or aware of these things nowadays? You will find that the da'wah, the material that is given, either irrelevant or it assumes that all you're addressing is Christianity. Was Jesus crucified? Was the Bible changed? Beyond that there is nothing. Beyond that, or let's say there is very little material to address other things. Contemporary thought. People believe in contemporary thought that believe in. Now, we talk about LGBTQ. This is part of the personal freedom. Personal freedom. This is your personal freedom to decide your gender, to decide your identity based on your sex, based on this and that. All of this, okay, well, how many presentations, how many books, how many leaflets do you see talking about personal freedom? Refuting the idea of personal freedom. Presenting the Islamic view of the concept of freedom. The concept of democracy, the concept of secularism. Because the root evil of all of this, when it comes to all this, is secularism. To say that God has nothing to do with life. Well, if God has nothing to do with life, who's going to put the moral standards for the society? If God is not putting the moral standards for the society, then it's going to be me and you. Well, now we changed our minds. Now we agree to men marrying each other. Now we are agreeing to, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, you're going down the line. And it's not, you see how fast it's going, because again, there is no moral standard that actually binds the society together because of secularism. So where are the writings that are given and to the carriers of da'wah to actually address the issue of secularism in a way that actually compelling for the Western-minded person? And I'm presenting them as an example. But my point is that there are contemporary thought, that go beyond the issue of Christianity, the issue of this. Actually, you will find people, if you tell them, I don't believe in Jesus, they'll tell you it's your business. But if you tell them, for example, I don't believe in freedom, it is not acceptable. Or we should not have secularism. In their mind, it immediately kicks in the issue of the church and the issue of the Catholic, the history with Catholicism. And, you're talking about something that's totally unacceptable versus if you tell them, I don't believe in God altogether. It's perfectly fine. Nobody's going to get upset if you tell them I don't believe in God, because again, it's your personal choice, you know. But so the idea here is that contemporary thought needs to be addressed on a society level so that you can become relevant. Otherwise, you know, where is the relevance in Islam? So the material, the da'wah material has to be updated and has to be actually brought to the level. And again, that is a challenge because again, who is writing it but other volunteers as well, you know, and that's the tendency. Another challenge that's facing the Muslims or the Muslim da'wah is coordination amongst organizations and masajid. If you notice, most of the time, masajid act as silos, you know, just separate entities altogether, as if, you know, the masjid next door, a few miles away, has nothing to do with the masjid, you know, that you are in. It is, and this is not the case. Organizations we need to benefit from the ulama of the Muslimin, from the guidance of the ulama. We need to coordinate amongst the masajid and Islamic organizations, because this what will give you the strength that you're looking for, the expertise that you might be lacking, but another place, another organization has. The imam here is fantastic in reciting the Quran, but the other one is good in fiqh. The third one is good in political science. Therefore, you know, we all lack in certain things, and we have our strength points as well. And therefore, that collaboration has to take place, you know, together for that. The masajid tend to be more busy really with social work most of the time than actually da'wah work, you know, and this is not to point fingers as a matter of blame, but they are overwhelmed with social problems in the community that they really have, unfortunately, they don't have time to go beyond the reality that they are living, you know, and that creates a big challenge for the Muslims. So you need that coordination, and at least, and this is something that I will mention. Start even on a small level of discussions periodically, every quarter. Just get together, see what kind of problems are you facing, how are we addressing them, what do we do about them. Maybe I can help you with this, maybe you can help me with that. Something along these lines where you can start actually building some integration amongst the masajid to do something positive like this. One challenge, by the way, that we are facing, and again, because here most of the effort is burdened by or carried by first generation or new reverts to Islam or new converts to Islam, but also the people who became Muslims, unfortunately, they are underutilized. I don't think that we Muslims are benefiting from the African American experience in this country. The African Americans went into a long history with the system in this country, and they are very aware of the way the system operates, very aware of the way the American mindset is, black or white, you know, aware of how they think. And we, unfortunately, we somehow think because we're, you know, quote unquote born Muslims, you know, that we automatically know more than they do. We don't need their input because somehow, you know, what can you teach me? Actually, they can teach us something or other. It doesn't mean that everything that they say or, you know, is to be taken, but it says that we need to hear them out because they have expertise in this area that I think that the da'wah will benefit from them. So where do we leave? Where do we leave from here? And I'll open the ground, inshallah ta'ala, or the floor for discussion. The first suggestion or the first thing that I would say is that, and there are only a couple of things, that we need to have a national conversation. The fact that the Muslims were able to, Muslim scholars and Muslim well-known da'is in the United States were able to produce a letter that everybody signed on and everybody agreed on and they passed, it means that they are able to coordinate. They're able to, you know, but it took, by the way, it took a big effort from the person, the sheikh who started the process. And it was very painful, but it is manageable. I'm saying maybe that's a starting point. The starting point is to start getting the people who are knowledgeable in Islam, influential organizations, people who are able to think and provide direction, etc., to start thinking on a national level, to see what should we be doing, what kind of at least blueprints or suggestions that we can provide to the Muslims as guidelines for their activism and for da'wah. Because in reality these things will impact the Muslims in the long term and impact Islam and future generations much more than if I had a problem with my wife and I divorced her and my children suffered. In the long term, the impact on the community and Islam is much bigger than the impact of one single family or here or there. Another thing is that we need training. Now it's become something as if asking for knowledge or seeking knowledge as if it's a dirty word. Nobody, or very few people who are interested in learning, etc. But in reality, people who are going to do da'wah, they need proper training. So you need courses offered if they're doing da'wah in Christianity or in Judaism, comparative religion with Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever is out there, and that these are your target groups. You need to be very well versed in what they are doing, as well as the Islamic, the Islamic ideas and the Islamic values. If you are talking on the level of the society, then you need to have courses in in political work. How does the American political system work? How do people elect? How do they get elected? How do you hold a person accountable for what you elected him for? How do you the role of money? Where does it play? What do you do? These things have to be taught for anybody who's going to be active. It is pushing the button to vote for X or that or Y. That's an easy thing, but to understand what you're doing and to make it impactful in the long term, that requires planning and requires deep understanding of reality. So, of course, not just the reality, but what is important, if not maybe more important, is to make sure, because at the end of the day we're saying we're doing all of this to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we need to know what pleases Allah and what displeases Him. You need to know the dawabit al-shar'iyya, the Islamic criteria, the rights and wrongs from the point of view of Islam, before you do any action with these things, because it's very easy to slip. It's very easy to make mistakes. It's very easy to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thinking that you are doing something that is right. So there has to be knowledge in the political system. There has to be knowledge in the halal and haram to know how to navigate the political system. And there are certain things we cannot do because they contradict with Islam, then we will not do them, period. Because at the end of the day, Allah ta'ala is not going to put barakah, is not going to make the success of the Muslims in the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not the way it works. That's not the way it works. So we need to make sure that whatever activism that we do is geared towards, or based on the Islamic value system. And finally, of course, in addition to the courses of this, we need adequate education material for Muslims and non-Muslims. For the Muslims to address their issues, because when you talk about losing the Islamic identity and just like we are talking about, we don't have adequate material to deal with non-Muslims. We really don't have adequate material to teach the Muslim American, the Muslim children in America. We're thinking that they're thinking like we did back home, where they're able to take ideas. Not at all. They're a different mindset, and they need to be addressed based on their mindset. So we need material developed by professionals and done over time, so that inshallah ta'ala it can keep up with the time. And those are just, as I said, reflections, and from a very humble point of view, from a very limited point of view, regarding the work that is taking place in the United States and the da'wah. And inshallah ta'ala, I'll leave it open if anybody wants to comment, disagree, ask questions. Please let me know. Okay, no questions, inshallah, we'll stop here. Alhamdulillah. Wa alaikum assalam. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خير.